Hello, listeners. I'm Jacob Levan, director of the Shellavision podcast. I'd like to take a moment to explain what this show is going to be all about. This podcast is being made by the Roxana Gaming and Esports Club. Every other week, either myself or another one of our hosts will sit down with different members of the gaming club or different Roxana students for what we call an open table discussion, to discuss news and controversial issues not only in the gaming world, but pop culture as a whole. The weeks where we won't be doing an open table discussion, we'll have a discussion, debate, or interview with different Roxana staffs and some other special guests. All of this is very experimental, though, and we ask that you stick with us as we find out what you, the audience, likes, and what we want to do internally. His podcast isn't limited to the gaming club exclusively. That's why it's the Shellavision podcast. We want this to be the voice of Roxana. Over time, we hope to expand the show into multiple clubs and have many different students participating in its production. We need all the feedback we can get. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Are single-player games dead? Are there too many battle royales? And what does this mean for those of us without friends? Welcome to the Shellavision podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Levan. This is episode 1. Here today I have one of our wonderful founders of the Roxana Gaming Club and captain of one of our Rocket League teams, Caleb Sutton.
Hello. Favorite game's Rocket League, in case you couldn't tell.
Also with us, we have Rocket League players Colin Rory.
Hi. Favorite game, Rocket League.
And Quentin Estrada.
Hello, my favorite games would be Rocket League and Overwatch, mostly because they are the games I play the most.
All right, so today we have a good show for you. Big question here today is, why are companies moving away from the single-player experience? Why are there not that many single-player games around anymore? Any inputs on that?
A lot of the time, people enjoy social interaction. Humans are a social species. So I feel like the multiplayer experience kind of allows you to play with your friends or play with people that aren't your friends, that may become your friends, meet new people, make new connections, instead of just going on an adventure, which I know a lot of people would rather do, but I feel like companies are kind of monopolizing.
Yeah, I feel like right now, VR chat's a really popular thing because of the random people you get to meet on there. So it's probably the way gaming has started to orientate itself. People are finding out that multiplayer games are widely more popular because of the more random encounters you get to meet, and it probably is easier for them given they don't have to come up with this complex storyline of what's going to happen when and how does this tie to this and whatnot. Just storylines of games doesn't have to be as complex with multiplayer games.
Yeah, I think the storylines are great for a lot of people. I would prefer to play a game with a very broad storyline. Mm-hmm. I like a good story game, but I feel like a lot of people just want to hang out with people and to meet new people and find friends, so they go on to multiplayer games, and so companies are just kind of capitalizing on it and just seeing that people would really like to play these multiplayer games. I think that's a lot of the reason why Battle Royales are so popular, is because you get to see a lot of people and meet a lot of people within the games, even though I would disagree because I don't like Battle Royales, but it's okay.
Okay, so I'm a big single player guy. I'm not really big into multiplayer. So when I see these companies switching from these franchises that have always been they've always had the single player campaigns, and maybe they have a multiplayer just added on kind of as an extra thing, it's really disheartening to me, because I want a fully fledged single player game and then a multiplayer on the side if I want to play it. I want to be able to have this game to myself and then share it with my friends if I want to share it. And a big example of that was Fallout 76. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest Fallout fan, but I played all the games. I own all the games. But when Fallout 76 came out, I was excited because I was like, okay, I get to have all these Fallout experiences, but with my friends. But then I actually get into it, and the only thing in it is other people, and there's no storytelling, and that really throws me off because I play those games for the story, and I just want to experience the story with other people.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to like see much about Fallout 76. I heard it was going to be a multiplayer game, but I didn't know much about it beyond that. So I feel like it does. I get what you're saying. Like it going from a single player story to a multiplayer sandbox-ish style or survival style kind of game. It is a drastic difference, and if I guess they probably should have maybe started the multiplayer, like eased into it with maybe a multiplayer story where you get to go through a small little story. Maybe it doesn't have to be that complex, so there's freedom between your choices, and that way you can do kind of whatever you want, but at the same time you get to experience the story with your friends. But it's like limited to maybe like 4, since that's this is a typical multiplayer game.
Yeah, I felt like they missed the mark where they could have made it just a co-op Fallout game, and I would have been on board with that if they would have made the story good. But the problem is that they pretty much cut out the story, and that's what I feel like that's where it gets a lot of the hate, is because not because it's necessarily a bad game gameplay wise, but when you cut out the RP in an RPG, it doesn't really work out very well.
So I've never actually played the game, but I've watched a lot of videos like about it and about how Bethesda has been like treating their players or whatever. And like from are there like any quests in the game, or is it just like no story at all?
There's quests, but most of the quests just consist of you found a note on a dead body and it says, go and look for this one person. And you go find that one person, but the one person's dead.
So they're not even NPCs.
There's no NPCs, but they do a really weird thing with it. It's not NPCs, but they have robots, and they say, the only humans you'll encounter are other players. But then you run into a robot, and that could have just been an NPC that gives you the same quests, or you interact with it the same way it's an NPC, but it's a robot, and it takes out the part of the game that you really like, which is like how it's post-apocalyptic, so it's how humans adapt. And when you have these other players that just run around and mess with people,
how can for players who don't care about it and just want to mess around, it's like, how can I mess around with people in a post-apocalyptic setting?
Yeah,
I feel like that just has to do with the toxicity of gaming nowadays. Like, a lot of people just they just go around and screw with other people's gaming because there are so many multiplayer games. You see that even in games where it's not just necessarily open world, but even in games like Rocket League, people go around and they screw with people. They say, I'm D-ranking. I had that experience yesterday where somebody just goofed around and scored on our own goal the entire game. So it just, multiplayer games just get so lost in all of this because people just take advantage of other people in them, and there's no storyline to go along with it. So I feel like creators have just missed that, and a lot more people are upset about it than they would have thought. Like, there was a huge outbreak and outlash about, Fallout 76, and I don't think Bethesda thought that would happen, but then it did, and they're like, oh shoot, whoa. And they're like, we thought this was a good game, and everyone's like, well, we don't. So they just missed that mark entirely.
So I think the main issue here, like with Fallout 76, like with there being quests that, go find this note, go find this person, the person's dead. Like, when you don't have NPCs to interact with, and when you don't have like quests to do, there's no story, so what's the point of
What's the
playing?
point of playing?
Like, what's the point of playing? What is the point of is it entertaining just kind of wandering around doing whatever? There's really no end goal. Like, I can understand people like make their own goals and like get to a certain point, but then what happens after you reach that point? There's no story, there's no extra like spice on top of it.
I think that Bethesda wanted to jump on the multiplayer games are getting really popular, but they didn't realize that this does take out the story that everyone loves so much about it, and at the same time, making it a massive multiplayer game leads to your obvious trolls that are going to be there along and ruin kind of the experience for everyone else, whether they might be new, they might be veterans of this game, and it kind of just ruins it for anyone who wants to play the game and enjoy it when they kind of just troll around.
There are a lot of games that actually like manage to do the whole big multiplayer thing like decently, like World of Warcraft. Like, they had a quest system, they have raids, they have all these things that you can do, and it's also massively multiplayer.
It's funny because not Bethesda, but their parent company ZeniMax, they have the Elder Scrolls Online, and that's a good game. And the Elder Scrolls games were Bethesda games, but when Bethesda wants to make a multiplayer game, they ship it off to a different company.
And they can't give it to the people who made the good game.
Yeah, and then the people who do make the good games can't make a good multiplayer game.
Yeah.
So another good example of companies that just kind of dropped out of the whole single-player thing. Activision dropped the single-player story from Black Ops 4.
They replaced it with a battle royale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to say a lot that drew me into, especially like the older Call of Duty games, was it was always the story. I didn't really care for the multiplayer, even though, you know, like Black Ops 3, like multiplayer was kind of fun for messing around with your friends, but the whole point that I saw in playing COD, especially in like Black Ops 1 and Modern Warfare 3, which was two of my big ones, I loved the story. This story drew me in. You know, when somebody died, I was like, dang, I just lost a friend. Like, that's part of the thing that was so intriguing to me as an early gamer, was getting to be involved in these stories where you're like taken out of reality for a bit and you're shifted into an alternate reality where you're, you know, you kind of get into the character that you are. And in multiplayer, you just don't get that. You don't get to feel like, oh, I'm this person, I have this objective. You just kind of mainly go around shooting everybody. And a lot of the battle royales, especially like Fortnite and
So going on with the whole story thing in Call of Duty is, so Call of Duty Ghosts. I didn't like the multiplayer, but I really liked the campaign.
the campaigns were always good.
I really liked the story that it had, and like right when I finished, I'm like, well, now I'm cliffhangered. I want to go. I want to Ghost 2 now, but I know that's not going to happen for a while. And since it, it didn't do very good, I doubt it's even going to happen at all.
Yeah,
Well, I've heard talks about a Modern Warfare 4.
That's something.
It might be a thing.
Games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I haven't played a lot of, but I do remember when I did play them, I really did enjoy the story, and I forget his name, but I remember there was one guy who would always have the worst luck, and he was like my favorite guy because he would have the worst luck on his missions. And just that story aspect of having stuff like that is probably what drew in most of the people who played those games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look at games like Halo, for example, like the multiplayer is not even a lot of why people go into that game. It's always because of the story. Like everyone, that storyline's so developed. If they just dropped it, it would be a huge blow to every gamer that loves Halo. Like I used to love Halo, and it was a great storyline. Master Chief and Cortana. It was always what drew me into the game. So I feel like when you just drop the story of a game, not even when you're just making a multiplayer game like PUBG, that was a multiplayer game from the start that never had a story, so that reached out to a different branch of gamers. But when you're going to take something like Call of Duty and just drop the story entirely, you're losing like half the people that play your game.
Yeah, it almost seems like sacrilegious. Like, imagine if Halo Infinite is going to be Halo Infinite, the Battle Royale.
Nobody would play the game.
Yeah, nobody would play it.
I mean, people would, just not,
not
as many.
I would probably play it because I like Halo, but...
I loved Halo Reach for its story. It's
Mhm.
probably my favorite because of its story.
Its story's
And
really good, and its multiplayer is so good, too.
Yeah, and the ability to customize your suit. It was a very small thing, but that ability to do that, the ability to make your own character kind of deal, to really kind of make your own suit and kind of put yourself in that story, just was really cool. And getting to see how that whole story went down and how you technically had a part in it was really nice.
Like, bringing up Halo Reach, like, that game just, it kind of brought together everything. Like, you were your own person and you identified with that person in that game. Like, I remember when Kat died, it was upsetting. Like, that hurt me.
Yeah, I was so mad
because I was
at
so
that.
involved in the story already that when you just, like, sometimes someone's gonna die, but it still hurts just because the story is so good and well developed.
The death of George, like, you might have guessed that was about to come, and it was sad. But then when Kat just suddenly dies, no spoilers, but when she had suddenly died, spoilers-ish.
It's an old one.
Yeah, but
nobody
You
needs
got
to worry
time.
about spoilers.
It's been 9 years.
So another thing, so have any of you played Destiny and Destiny 2?
I kind of got into
I've played a
Destiny
little
1.
bit, but
So,
I bought Destiny.
okay, so basically, you guys know, like, what it's about. Like, so basically, the lore gets super in depth. Like, it's not like in the game necessarily, but like I remember in Destiny 1 they had these like Grimoire cards where you would like collect the lore in the game, and then if you went to the Bungie website, you could read. And it's like this super multiplayer thing. It has its own story, but it also has like an expanded story to it. And then I remember when, like in Destiny 2, they killed one of the fan favorite characters, and like this was like a really good and bad thing for them, because I feel like they were kind of using him as a crutch because he was like the only like developed character. He was the only character that actually had like a personality to him, and the other ones were just kind of there. And then killing him off kind of like opened some growth for the other characters, since it was like, oh, they were all friends, even though they like treated each other this certain way. They were all friends, and now they can all grow from it. And yeah, I just feel like even in a multiplayer game, you can have a good story. Like, you can have a good single player too, because I know a lot of the quests in Destiny are single player. Like there's the single player, the multiplayer, and then I feel like there's this kind of crossfade where you can have good of both.
Yeah, I feel like that is a possibility, but just people or developers just get kind of lazy with trying to figure out how to implement both. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but I mean, I feel like they fall short of what it could be.
I feel like the death of a character, especially one that you like in a story, it helps the story along so much. And it's a sad thing, like, you're upset that it happened, but, like,
It motivates
I know
you.
when I've seen in a lot of games where I loved a character and they died, it added so much to the story.
Undertale.
Yes.
True.
That is the only word I
Yes.
have to say. And unless you've been living under a rock for like the last 5 years, you understand what I'm talking about.
Flowey.
Howdy.
So you have these companies that are switching to pretty much exclusively multiplayer games like Activision. Who picks up the slack? You have these indie companies that come in. The indie scene for single-player games is just this rich thing like Undertale. Undertale's a good example.
Deltarune, which is the sequel to Undertale.
And you get to have these experiences that you wouldn't be able to have there really by a big company. Sure, EA has their Unravel, Yarny, whatever. But you have something like Cuphead, which takes 5 years to make. Or you have these small developers like I know Munfish is making this game called Atomic Heart, which pretty much everybody has described as it's Fallout, but in Russia. And it's going to be... I feel like that's going to be a really cool game if they do it right. And I feel like that's pretty much exclusively made to fill the spot that Fallout has left with Fallout 76. And then we have Obsidian's Outer Worlds. Obsidian, not an independent developer. They're getting bought out by Microsoft. But they're the company who made... Fallout New Vegas, and they made the original Fallouts. So you get to have this giant open world and this fully fleshed out RPG. Hopefully, don't get too much on the hype train, but like, it's just what Fallout 76 is missing. I know we've been talking about Fallout 76 a lot, but I feel like if you can have an open world, you can have this deep story, and then you incorporate multiplayer into it, then that's good. Or if you make the game, you make the single player, then you have a multiplayer like on the same map. Like if they would have made Fallout 76 Fallout 4 multiplayer, like you're still in Boston but you're playing with other people, completely different story, something like that would have worked out.
Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter does that, I think, really well. Monster Hunter World has a storyline to it. So you can play that story and do the things in it and have fun killing gigantic dragons and monsters on your own, or you can actually join a party and do the same thing. So it's a multiplayer game. It's not massively multiplayer because there are limitations. You can have like 4 people in a party when you go play on the certain mission.
All right, so enough about multiplayer. Let's talk about single player a little more. So are the single player games we have now deep enough, or are they just the company's attempt to put in a game before you have another multiplayer game? Like Red Dead 2, great game, great open world, But then you get into the missions, and if you go a certain path on a mission, you get kicked out, or like if you try to take a different route, if you try to be stealthy, the game goes, no, you can't do that. You have to do it the way we want you to do it. And I feel like something like that should be more open for the player.
I mean, stuff like that, it seems, what it sounds like is just they either didn't know how to kind of implement a system that would recognize what you're trying to approach, or they did just want you to follow a story that has a certain path, and if it wants you to do that, I feel like they could have probably made it to where they hinted at or gave you a hint that this is your path, and you can't really go anywhere else. Sorry. We'll show you all this cool scenery, but I mean, you're following a story, so this is your kind of not open world area.
I can see that, but it's weird because they have that open world, and when you're not in a mission, it's like go out, explore, find all these things, and then when you're actually in a mission, you're like you have to go here exactly this way. If you go any other way, and it doesn't really mesh very well.
I would say I feel like if they wanted to do something like that, they should have had it either closed world or done something to where they had it to where like it's a thing on your map, so it's not like it's not a time thing to where you can still kind of go this route but go there, and do it in a sense to where even if you want to take the stealthy approach, they alter the story in a way to where you might still think you're doing something stealthy, but behind the scenes it's really just the same way.
It's the same story, yeah.
It's the same story, but it makes you feel good that you got to do that stealthy thing.
And I feel like whenever you limit players, especially in like a single player circumstance, it sort of breaks the immersion. And whenever you're playing a single player game, you're trying to like project you're not really trying to, but you subconsciously project yourself onto the character. Like the character sort of becomes you, and you become the character, and like your tendencies, like obviously you're controlling the player, so like your tendencies obviously go to what the character does in the game. And so like if you're not letting people do the stealthy thing, but like they're the type of people that would do that rather than just kick down a door and start rambling. And I just feel like I don't feel like that's how a single player game should be. I feel like people should be able to make their own choices, be allowed to like have their own morals, and like make their own decisions, and like what do they think is right, what do they think that they should do, rather than what does the developer think you should do.
I mean, some games like can pull that off very well, where you have a controlled story where it's taking you to a common objective the entire time, like a campaign sort of thing. But if we're talking about open worlds, like something like Just Cause, like I loved that game, especially the second one, and it was great because you could do what you wanted, and there was missions that you could go all around the map to try and find, but you didn't have to do them. You could just go fly around a jet or whatever. I think that's part of what makes GTA so loved by so many people. But then, like, in Just Cause 3, I was super excited about the game. I mean, Caleb knows that. I wanted the game for forever. Finally, when I did end up being able to play the game, I got into it, and the open world was still great, but then the story was missing so much.
Oh, yeah.
The story was just... It didn't immerse me at all. Like, it was just so... I couldn't follow the character because it missed that... Like, Just Cause 2 had that grounded story that you knew what you were trying to do the entire time. But then this one is like, it had you following a pipe for like 10 stories.
Oh,
you were just that constantly doing the same thing over and over again. It was like, how long did it take you to make that? Like 5 minutes? Like, there was just no depth to the story at all. So I feel like there needs to be a balance between open world and also having a great story. I feel like you need to have that grounded story. Otherwise, you're going to lose people. Like, I haven't played Just Cause 4 yet, but I have heard it's not any better, so...
I feel like games that people really like and that have good stories and allow you to put yourself into the shoes of players is the Choose Your Own Adventure games. People really like them because you get to really be like, this is my choice, and it blatantly says, this will affect the way your story goes. So you really get to explore a story that is fleshed out to a certain extent, and to get to have your say in what you do and your actions and choices affect how that story goes. And I mean, I've seen a few limitations on that, but I mean, it is kind of the closest to getting to control the story in a sense.
Like in Infamous, they have the whole like the karma system where
Mm-hmm.
you do one
Yeah.
thing, it gives you bad karma, and then you got your good karma,
Well,
and then there's like these choices you can make throughout the game where it would be like, oh, this is the good choice, this would give you good karma, but this is the bad choice, it would give you bad karma. Like, do you want to be loved or do you want to be feared?
Yeah.
See, I almost prefer a karma system like that, but it's really ambiguous on what's actually the good
And they-
choice and what's the bad choice.
And it's all up to you.
Yeah, it's all up to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Those are
And
great.
I mean, you could see that with Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, but then you get to Fallout 4, and they limit your dialogue tree so much. You get, instead of maybe 7 or 8 options you get to choose from to tell somebody, you only get 4. There's a good
Oh, I
one,
hate
a
that.
bad one, a sarcastic one, and then one where you're like, pay me. That's always the choices it's gonna be.
I personally hate that, like how games limit what you can say. Like, I feel like there should be a lot more options because there's so many diverse people that are going to play that game. They're all going to have different things that they would say in that scenario. So, I mean, you can't make like 50 different options for someone to say, but you can't limit it down to like 4 things. That just completely takes out the idea of being able to personalize what you want to say.
I feel like one thing that might, like a good concept would be like, it starts out as like a very like big variety of different things you could say, like the feel of like whatever, like the bad guy, the good guy, whatever, and then like as you choose your speaking options, it narrows it down to a certain personality that you've given your character. I feel like that would be a cool concept.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, but I just feel like, no offense to any of the developers out there, but I feel like there are just a lot of developers and groups that are unfortunately just kind of too lazy to figure out how to really properly implement that. I mean, it's not an easy thing, so they want to make it a way to where it's still, you still have your choices, but they're doing it in kind of an easy, simple way. So
I mean, let's be honest here. The people making these decisions don't really have to do anything. They say, "Hey, coders, do this," and then they give them some money, and then that's what they're supposed to do.
I don't think it's really the fault of the developers. I think it's the fault of how the development cycle really works.
Yeah.
Because you just get a bunch of bigwigs going, hey, we need this game now. And you go, okay, the only way we can do this is if we cut corners like that. And so I think the reason Fallout 4 really cut down on their dialogue tree is because they moved from a voiceless protagonist that you get to choose your own background pretty much, and then they moved to an actual voice actor, which I like the voice actor that did it, but it limits the choice so much. And then with the personality of the voice actor, they had to give him some sort of background, and that pretty much cuts out a lot of the RPG elements that you can get, where you make your own character, make their own background in your head, and like experience the world through them. You're now this person, but you get to choose what they look like.
Another game that actually did that was, again, Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. Well, it was more Destiny 2. So basically what happened was, Destiny 1, you're completely silent. You didn't say a thing throughout the entire game. But in Destiny 2, the Forsaken DLC, the one where Cayde 6 died, or got murdered, more specifically, it was the first time that your character ever spoke. And I think they put in more dialogue for your character, but I think the only difference is he doesn't talk that much, or your character doesn't talk that much.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the one line was, like, I forgot the exact line, but it was something about getting revenge on the people that did it to him because, like, fan favorite character. Like, who's not going to like it? Like, so it kind of just makes sense that that's what they would say. And the player probably reflected that too, so it was just kind of a safe bet there. And I don't really know a lot of the other dialogue that they put in, but I know that like, the only way that you can really have a voiced protagonist while also trying to completely have player immersion is difficult.
yeah, I feel like it's all coming down to competition. They want to get these cool games out there, and I feel like whether they mean to do it or not, it's competition that really sets these deadlines and makes them kind of either have to cut corners or get lazy and end up cutting corners.
So, let's talk about EA for a second.
Boy.
So this isn't going to take too long, but basically what I just want to say is what some companies are doing is, in an effort because they want money, they need to have money to stay in business. That makes sense, but there's a certain point where it gets shady.
Yeah.
And EA I forgot if it was EA, it might be Blizzard, but I know one of the two has a no refund policy. So you can't even, like, the only way you're going to figure out if a game is good or not before you buy it is by waiting for reviews. But, like, they all have all these pre-orders and little special things that happen if you order the game early, but now it's a bad game and you can't refund it and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think that that's really shady, but at the same time, it's also kind of genius.
I mean, I don't know about all the Blizzard games, but I know like games like Overwatch from Blizzard, they do have occasionally the free weekend thing, so there's that. So you don't actually have to purchase the game.
Yeah, but
I do get what you're saying, and I have heard cases about that. Also, along with that, EA doing the it was EA, right, that did the whole you have to pay to get these extra story bits.
I think every company has this pre-order, like DLC pre-order stuff that's just kind of the
not
norm.
the DLC. It's like you get to play the game, but you have to pay more money to get certain stories. I forget who it was.
Rockstar did something like that. They did pre-order Red Dead Redemption 2. You get 2 exclusive missions. It's like, why were those missions just not in the game?
I think it was with sorry if I'm wrong, but I think it was with Star Wars where you got to play and there's kind of a story to it, but you have to pay money to continue. And yes.
Yeah. So the thing about Battlefront is pay to win.
Yes.
And
that's what it was.
Why couldn't they just remake the first one?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't they just remake the first Battlefront 2? I don't understand why they had to like throw all this stuff in there. Just remake the first Battlefront 2. Boom, you're good. Better graphics, all you need. It's not hard.
I remember playing at least I think I remember. I was really little then. Playing the first Star Wars kind of multiplayer. It was just to me really cool because I was so little and I didn't completely understand what I was doing, but getting to play as these Star Wars characters was cool. Mm-hmm. And then hearing that they have it to where you have to pay to win is kind of disheartening, and it seems unfair. You should be able to play the game and have fun and not be limited. And DLCs make sense, but this doesn't.
Yeah, I know that I've never played Battlefront personally. I've heard it's a really good game, the first one, but then like the second one came out and just nobody talked about it. So, I mean, I didn't even know there was a second one, honestly, because nobody said anything. But I remember there was so much talk about the first Battlefront. Everyone loved the game. So
did everyone love the game?
I don't think so.
I feel like a lot of people
No,
like the game.
I think a lot of people like the premise of the game more than the game themselves. Because I think what a lot of like companies are doing is they're like they're like, oh, this is a cool concept. Let's make this into a game. But then the game's really bad, but people still play it because it's the only game with that concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like EA right now is the only people that can make Star Wars games because they have the license to do it, and they did this pay to win stuff. Battlefront 1 from EA was okay. It was meh. I mean, I enjoyed it because I like Star Wars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But would I recommend someone else buying it? No. Battlefront 2 was pay to win. The only reason I even knew about it was because I think there was a couple YouTubers that were talking about how they got like special like beta access at like a certain like convention or something, and they got to play a little bit and they talked about it.
I think that's a bigger problem too. Like, you have these big companies that have these iconic IP, and then they take something with it and they just kind of ruin it. You have, I hate talking about Fallout so much, but you have Fallout 76. You have something like Assassin's Creed Unity.
Oh boy.
Yeah. You have these like beloved franchises. They mess them up. Can you go back from that?
I mean, you can.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people like talk about certain games being like this. I didn't like this, and this about it, and I'm sad to see that this ended up happening to it. But I feel like there's still hope. Basically, like if they did X, Y, and Z, that like to me, I don't think what the people are suggesting out there is that complicated. Like they're saying if they did this or brought this back, that it would be fine and they'd be satisfied with that. Like I feel like with any company, you're gonna obviously have your setback and realize, we thought this was gonna be enjoyed by a lot of people, but it doesn't seem like this case, and we're trying to fix it, and people will forgive you if you seem to be actually trying to listen to your fans and community.
But that's only if you try, because
yeah.
See, the thing about these companies is that they don't. They pump out a game and then they're like, oh yeah, whatever, and then they just kind of brush all the backlash off, and they're like, okay, well, we'll just make another game. with the same issues, and then people still buy it. We'll still get money. We don't care.
That's a big problem when you have these big franchises and people are like, I love this franchise, and then you get an okay game. And you shouldn't get okay games out of a big franchise like that. You should get great games every time. It's hard to get lightning in a bottle every time, but you could still make good enough games.
Yeah, the one thing I've noticed is nowadays from like these big AAA companies is that there's a lot more flops than there used to be. There used to be these constant stream. Like there's just so many good games, but most of them are from the past.
Yeah.
And nowadays you don't see a lot of these like good games come out.
I feel like now it's a rush to get that money because of all the competition, but back then they were kind of the people who were making these games were like the first of their kind sort of deal. So I mean, I feel like now it's just they're trying to get the games out there and unfortunately not making the best of what they probably could.
So the big takeaway is companies listen to your fans.
Yeah.
Companies make more single players that are good.
I mean, even if it costs you more money, I'm willing to bet that if you make a really cool game, people are gonna pay more for it.
You have people out there who still want to play single player games. Single player games are one of the main things that a lot of people want. Like I would much rather play a single player game even by myself. Well, I mean that's the point. But I mean, I'd rather play a game by myself that has a good story that wraps me in the story. It's like reading a book or watching a movie, which a lot of people don't always do nowadays. But I mean, like the Avengers movie, I mean, I'd rather watch that by myself than with people. I'd rather do things that are interactive by myself sometimes rather than just always playing a multiplayer game where I have to deal with other people, you know?
Thank you guys for joining me. This has been a good talk.
Anytime.
Thank you all for listening. Join us next week when we have Philip Tarpley of Jundru Games on. This has been the Shell-O-Vision Podcast, Episode 1, signing off.